Hi, this is Eddie Muller, back with Ann Hawkins, Director of Communication for the Film Noir Foundation. We are here for another October installment of Ask Eddie and Ann. And Charlotte, if she's around there somewhere, has yet to make her appearance. I guarantee you Tizzy won't be appearing tonight. I came upstairs in my office. She was totally racked out on the floor in the bedroom in like the day's last little bit of sunshine. So we're not going to be seeing her this evening. She's the mystery cat anyway.
I know.
Ann, how are you?
I'm actually doing really well. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just found out that all of my siblings are coming to Thanksgiving this year. So
wow.
The whole family will be together. I'm very excited.
And where will Thanksgiving take place?
Sugarland, Texas. We're going down to see, to my mother's house.
Excellent. Well, that will be great. I hope it goes well.
Me too. Especially since I don't drink anymore.
Family gatherings. I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't drink at family gatherings. So anyway, let's dive in, Ann, because I'm a little, it will be an attenuated version this week because I actually have to run at some point and get my wife at the airport.
Very important. Okay, this one's from Hillary. The Black Gravel screening at 2020's Virtual North City was one of my pandemic viewing highlights. Can you suggest other post-war European Asian noir that also addresses the cultural conflicts between occupying American and other forces and local populations, or that has Cold War themes but not from the American perspective?
Okay, that's kind of I'm very glad that Hillary enjoyed Black Gravel. That was a real discovery. So I just want to give a shout out to Brett Wood at Kino Lorber Video for putting that on my radar and enabling us to show the film, before the festivals were kind of shut down in 2020. That got a few screenings. And it is, of course, available to anybody who wants to see it as a Blu-ray from Kino Lorber. This is an interesting question, but kind of tough because it's so specific. I'm only recently gotten into watching or seeking out and watching, I guess we've written about them in the magazine and called them rubble films because they are, they take place in the aftermath of World War II, but specifically from the point of view of the losing sides. And as you might imagine, it's difficult for those countries to make films in which they are showing the Allied occupation of the countries. That wasn't something that people necessarily wanted to see in their entertainments. That's what makes Black Gravel so unique, is that it was made later. It was made in 1960. And for people who haven't seen it, it's specifically about the black market that springs up around a city where the U.S. forces are building an air base specifically, to demarcate the point with the Soviet Union, like this and no further, and about all the tensions that brings to this town. You can see this in a lot of Japanese films, although I haven't seen a film where that is the point of the movie, but a lot of early 1950s Japanese crime films touched on that because there was so much black market activity that came with the occupying forces. And in those Japanese Sun Tribe movies, which are like juvenile delinquent films of the time, you definitely saw a lot of those were about the influence that American soldiers had on the Japanese culture because of the music that they brought in and how it westernized traditional Japanese culture. So there's a lot of films in that subgenre, which isn't really noir, that sort of focus on that. And you can, films, Kurosawa's films, Drunken Angel and Stray Dog and things like that definitely touch on that, but they don't really show much of the occupying forces. I do know that one thing that's really interesting about this is, and you see this in Italian films of the early 50s and Japanese films of the 50s, that American soldiers, some of them stayed because they actually, I think, preferred it in these other cultures, and many of them end up in these movies.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see how these foreign cultures accepted African Americans more readily than they accepted other Americans. It's kind of fascinating. And the only other thing I'll say is, and this book just came into my possession, written by a friend of mine, Jim Morton. It's called Movies Behind the Wall, and it is specifically the story of East German films post World War II. The subtitle is The Story of East German Films and the Rise and Fall of the German Democratic Republic. And people may or may not know that the East German film industry post World War II was taken over by an outfit called DEFA, DEFA, which was a Soviet owned entity that basically controlled all filmmaking in East Germany. And Jim has done, I mean, I'm just getting into this and I'm learning so much, but I haven't seen these movies, so I can't really recommend anything. But I got this book. There's an ebook version of this, and now it's actually in print. And I got it, from the great monolithic purveyor of all things. And I'm enjoying dipping into it. So I hope that helps Hillary somewhat, that's all I really can say on that subject. I did my best.
Okay.
Okay. We have two questions from John in Arlington, Virginia. He notes that heist flicks have come up a lot lately, but his favorite is definitely not noir. He wants to know what we think of Big Deal on Madonna Street, which is an Italian film from, I think it's 1958. Anne, do you have a...
I actually haven't seen it. It's actually been like on my list of things to see forever, and I still haven't gotten around to it.
Well, we showed it at Noir City in San Francisco as part of our Festival of Heist films, because there are some that I wanted to show that were, that they're more heist films than they are noir films, as John points out right here. There she is. Charlotte must be a fan. She's seen it. Charlotte has seen Big Deal on Madonna Street, even if you haven't. And she wanted to come and put in her 2 cents about her idol, Marcello Mastroianni. Marcello Mastroianni. Anyway, I like the film very much. It's hysterical. And I highly recommend it. And I'm trying to think of what, I know there was an American remake of it not that long ago, but I'll be damned if I can remember what it was called. So that's not helping anybody. Okay, Anne, have you seen Crime Without Passion, the 1934 Claude Rains movie? Have you seen that?
I think so.
Because that is John's other question is about Ben Hecht's Crime Without Passion. He notes that it has one of the most unusual openings in film history, and he wants to know if there are other opening scenes that made us realize we were in for a very unique ride. Anne, if you have not seen this, you need to rectify that immediately.
No, it's just weird this came up because my mother and I were literally talking about Claude Rains this morning.
Well, not only is it a fantastic Claude Rains performance, I know in America, The Invisible Man was like the thing that brought him to prominence, but this is the most Claude Rainsian performance you can imagine. He plays a very arrogant attorney who decides to defend himself in a murder case. And that doesn't do anything to explain how bizarre this film is. And the sequence that John is referencing is actually not done by Ben Hecht. It's directed by Slavko Vorkapic, the great montagist, if you will. And Vorkapic was just this amazing cinema artist. And you can see the whole movie, I believe, on YouTube. I'm not one to recommend doing that, but this is not an easy film to see. But so thankfully it is on YouTube. Or you can just acquaint yourself with the title sequence, which is also on YouTube. And it's funny because it's not actually a title sequence. It's like part of it is a post-title sequence and part of it is a pre-title sequence, because the film is so unusual. It like does credits at the very beginning, and then it has this incredibly fantastic, literally a fantastic, like it's fantastical opening sequence that sets the tone, and then at the end all this broken glass forms the title of the movie, which has been withheld until that moment. And it is spectacular. And to answer John's question, no, I can't think of any other sequence in a movie of this era that is remotely like this. And I don't even and it's odd because when I think of film noir, I think of creative title sequences in film noir, but this isn't exactly a title sequence. It's like a surreal preface to the film. So I can't recommend it enough. And just so people, Crime Without Passion is always, when people say, isn't there noir in the pre-code era? This is the movie that I mentioned first. It's like the most noirish of pre-code movies.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, for opening scenes, maybe realize that you're in a unique ride. Has to be the Sam Fuller film. Oh God, it has "Kiss" in the title.
Oh, The Naked Kiss.
The Naked Kiss, yeah. Which, I mean, I remember we were watching the opening of it, and we were just like, "What the hell?" That is like, and the rest of the film lived up to it.
Yes, that's a good call. I had forgotten about that, and I also remember when I was doing some research on Sam's Underworld USA, I came across these notes for the title sequence that he intended to do for Underworld USA, which was incredible, because it was a bunch of naked women writhing around on the floor. And then one of them gets up and addresses the camera, and it was all about unionizing prostitutes. And it was like, holy cow. But that never got made, so that we can't count that amongst the most extraordinary title sequences ever.
And I would say that my all-time favorite opening of any film was a Sam Fuller Western, 40 Guns. And I've never been like, my jaw was on the floor. I love that opening so much. I mean, Barbara, yes. Oh my God. So if you haven't seen that movie, like, I don't want to spoil it. Like, seriously, just watch the movie. It's a great film anyway, and you'll know exactly. And I saw that actually in a tiny little theater in Seattle that's no longer there. And I was not expecting that.
It is incredible. If you're a Barbara Stanwyck fan and you haven't seen 40 Guns, yeah. And yes, that opening this is why people love Sam Fuller, because they say he's like pure cinema. And that opening is absolutely extraordinary. And of course, Stanwyck did her own writing,
of course,
which is the best.
Yeah, okay. And I think just with Sam Fuller, I think that's just because he was a journalist. You have to have a great lead to pull people into the story, and I just think that transferred into his filmmaking.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay, this is from Gordon Kidd. The 1970s saw an era of blaxploitation film, Shaft, etc., as distinct from neo-noir. Would you agree that the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s saw an era of noirsploitation films, TV series, like Mike Hammer with Darren McGavin, Tony Rome with Frank Sinatra, and there's others? Or do you consider all these film, TV series, and novellas based thereon neo-noir? Is there a difference? What makes them distinct?
I'm not exactly sure that I understand the question, because I get blaxploitation being like a new thing. The difference is when Gordon talks here about noir exploitation, he's also, most of those examples he cites are like detective shows.
Yeah.
Which, while Shaft was a detective, most of the other blaxploitation movies, they weren't really detective stories. They were very often stories about people outside the law, Black Caesar and stuff like that. And those in many ways seem a little more noir to me, like gangster movie / noir, than the detective stories. I think that television has always had its detective stories. I mean, and that's what's funny, because he cites the Mickey Spillane thing, but the Mickey Spillane series goes back into the 50s. There was originally going to be one with Brian Keith in the mid 1950s, where Brian Keith was going to play Mike Hammer, and that didn't come off. But then, he's been played by a lot of people in all those decades, right? And then, you get your David Jansen noir on TV, whether it's The Fugitive, or I've read a lot lately of people talking about the series Harry O, and how they really liked that. It was a much better series than people realized at the time. But detective stories have always been a thing on TV that I just see as being, by and large, kind of separate from noir or neo-noir, quite honestly. I mean, there's some period stuff that happened, like City of Angels and things like that with I remember that Wayne Rogers was in that. But and Tony Rome, the other one that Gordon cites here, was without question like more directly linked to the 40s stuff than other films, because Sinatra did that because he specifically wanted to do Bogart.
Yeah.
He felt like he had never got to play his Bogart role, and Bogart was his idol.
Yeah.
And so that's why he did Tony Rome, and then Lady in Cement, its sequel. And, they're fun to watch, but they don't really hold up very well, because they're interesting because they're so out of step with the time.
Yeah.
By the time Sinatra made those films, that whole boozy, bantering 40s thing that we associate with noir was kind of not working for a 60s audience. And they're a little cringy today.
Yeah.
When you watch them, because of the misogyny and the sexism in the films, which is even more than the earlier films had.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my take on that.
Yeah. Your turn.
Okay, recently you fielded a question about Nova Scotian noir. I'm sure we didn't field it cleanly.
Nope. We did not.
On a similar note, are there any post-war Russian films you consider noirish? Wow. The earliest one I found was, I'm not even going to attempt the Russian pronunciation, but the English translation is Adam Wants to Be a Man. Sounds much more like a 50s sexploitation film. Adam Wants to Be a Man from 1959, which Paul from Madrid is writing in. He hasn't located it yet, but he's looking for it. So boy, I'm people are really trying to stump us now.
I know.
Found any good post-war Russian noir? If
Yeah.
I would love to, I
Yeah.
would love to. All I can say, Paul, in Madrid, is when we were programming the international noir festivals, don't think I didn't look. I mean, I really tried to find stuff, but as Paul is no doubt learning, it's hard to get your hands on it, even when you learn that it exists. You know, the only thing I've seen that is like really fascinating and Criterion got there was that Andrei Tarkovsky did a version of The Killers, Hemingway's The Killers, that Criterion was cool enough to include on that double set where they put the 46 killers and the 64 killers together and put this Tarkovsky short film. It was a student film that he had done on it as a bonus, and it was really, really interesting. Boy, talk about austere.
Yeah, it was very, very much so. And the only thing I was going to say about this was there is what I think is the best adaptation of And Then There Were None, the Agatha Christie story, was this Russian film, like from the 70s. And I hunted it down, and it's great. It's so good. And by far, like I said, I felt it was like the most faithful to the story.
Fantastic. Okay, I haven't seen that, so I am definitely going to look for that. I won't make you recall the title right now, but I will. Is the English title And Then There Were None?
I think it's either And Then There Were None, or maybe no. I think the English title was actually 10 Little Indians. So that was the Russians went with the original. Well, not exactly the original, but the second title for that. We won't say what the first one was.
the original title has long since been abandoned, thankfully. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You go.
This is from Bob. One of my favorite movies is Christopher Nolan's Memento. And there's been a big disagreement by fans on what exactly happened to Guy Pearce's character in the past, which version of a story was real, and what he misremembered, maybe intentionally. What do you think really happened? Is he an unreliable narrator, and is the movie noir?
What do you say?
I think that, I don't know how to do this without spoiling it for people. Okay, spoilers, close your ears. I think at the end, when it shows that he accidentally overdosed his wife on insulin, I think that's what actually happened.
Oh, I have no doubt that's what happened, and I truly do believe that Leonard is an unreliable narrator, because how can you rely on anybody whose memory doesn't last? Short-term memory lasts only 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So he is a totally unreliable narrator. The question is just how unreliable. Because I remember watching that movie and originally thinking, how are they going to, because I had seen enough of these type of noir films from the 40s, like Black Angel and things like that, where it's like, oh, I know where this is going, right? Yeah. But it wasn't exactly going where I thought it was. So he wasn't an unreliable narrator in the sense that he's just making it all up and completely lying. But I definitely got the feeling that there was like a shock to the system, because of the incident. There was this shock to the system that caused him to misremember certain things. That was vital to the plot. I just wasn't, and bear in mind that I haven't seen Memento in maybe 15 years or more, right? But I do remember being surprised, again, spoilers, at the whole subplot about how people were manipulating him.
Yeah.
Right. And they were using his memory loss to their advantage. Yeah. And that was that was really cool. And I really like those early Chris Nolan movies. I'm a big fan of Following as well as Memento, and I like Insomnia as well. I'm just less fond of his big epic movies, although I appreciate how daring he is and how challenging he chooses to be in the way he tells stories. I'm just not a real science fiction guy, and I tend to get a little buried under the weight of Inception and Interstellar and stuff like that. It's just like fascinating, but they don't hook me the way the early noir influence stuff does.
Yeah.
Okay, my turn.
Yeah.
Okay, Terry says that Michael Mann has made some great films, all in Technicolor, I believe. Well, I'm not sure. We'll have to double check that. And surely several of them qualify as film noir. I agree. Terry's favorite is Collateral with Tom Cruise. Great performances by Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. And especially important, the nighttime scenes of LA. Terry is interested in our views on Collateral.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, man. You're letting me
I do
down.
actually watch movies, just so everyone knows.
Well, okay, here, I hate to disappoint you, Terry, but Collateral is one of my least favorite Michael Mann movies. It deserves another viewing. I've only seen it once. I'm going to confess that as much as I liked Jamie Foxx in that role, I didn't like Tom Cruise. It is a terrible thing to say, but because I know he's a huge movie star and all that, but I don't believe Tom Cruise with a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
And I sort of never have in anything, really, like the Mission Impossible movie, all that stuff. He's good in Rain Man, and he's good in Born on the 4th of July, but when he plays an action hero, I just don't believe it. And I had a hard time accepting him as like this cold-blooded assassin in the movie. Even though they put they did the white thing in the hair that they did with Mickey Rourke in Year of the Dragon.
Yeah.
They say if like you can't believe these guys, like try to make him look like Lee Marvin. And that somehow will make them appear believable with a gun in their hand. No, like if Collateral had been made with Lee Marvin in that role,
yeah, that would have been a good movie.
I would have lost my mind. Anyway, it's interesting. I will tell you, since I'm disappointing Terry on that one, I'm going to quickly tell a story that I probably shouldn't tell, but I will. The year that Collateral came out, and I know the screenwriter's name is Stuart Beatty. And the year Collateral came out, I was on the committee to choose the Edgar Award for Best Motion Picture Screenplay. And Collateral was one of the choices that year. And there were several others, only a couple of which I can remember at the moment. But I created a bit of a stink at the Mystery Writers of America because I said that it was wrong for us to be choosing an award for best screenplay if we weren't reading the screenplays. Like, it wasn't fair to base that judgment on the finished film because we don't know how much was added, subtracted, what the director brought to it, all this stuff. And I said, why can't we get the people to submit the screenplays? If you want to give them an award, like, they give awards for novels, you have to submit the novel in order to win the award. But with movies, they were just like, no, this one came out, we'll consider that a nominee. And I said, well, this is unfair because the people who live in areas, in major metropolitan areas, are all going to vote for Collateral because it has the widest release of any movie. And there were movies on that list, foreign films, like a beautiful Italian movie called I'm Not Scared, and a French film called A Very Long Engagement, which just weren't available to people on that committee who lived outside major areas, right? So my raising this stink, not only did it result, I think, in Collateral not winning the Edgar Award, because a very long engagement ended up winning the award that year. They eliminated the category. They eliminated the category entirely, which is amazing to me because they still vote on best episode of a television series and best stage play. I mean, how many mystery stage plays are there to vote on, right? But it was just, I made my case, which is like, if we're going to vote for a screenplay, let's read the screenplay. And that never happened. So I'm still a dues paying member of the MWA, but I haven't been invited to serve on any more committees. All right, that's that one.
And this is from Evan. Eddie, have you seen the trailer to Del Toro's Nightmare Alley? Plus, what is your opinion of readaptations like it in the 1980s Postman Always Rings Twice?
I have seen the trailer, and it looks terrific. I'm very intrigued, and I just did a very long interview with a journalist who's writing a story. I wish I could remember at the moment what the magazine is, but he's doing a big feature on Nightmare Alley, and I did a very extensive interview about the original film and my ideas about the adaptation, which I have not seen, but which I am greatly looking forward to, because like any person who's a movie fan, that has a cast that is just sensational. And I've come around on Bradley Cooper, but if you put Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara in a movie, I'm going to go watch it, right?
Yeah.
And then if you get Toni Collette in there and David Strathern and Ron Perlman, it's really inspired casting of the novel. So, but I can't say what I think of the adaptation because I have not seen it. And I think in general, Evan, I think, who submitted this question, is just asking in general, what do we think of new versions of these older works? I think the only thing wrong with Bob Rafelson's Postman Always Rings Twice is Jack Nicholson. I just think he was terribly miscast, but I know that's why the movie got made, is because he was just hot as a firecracker right then. And when they said, and obviously Rafelson had done, Easy Rider, or not Easy Rider, but Five Easy Pieces, and King of Marvin Garden. So he and Jack Nicholson were simpatico, and so it was like, Jack, let's do this, and that got it funded. But Jack Nicholson was way too old to play that part, and that's supposed to be a very young man. John Garfield was too old to really play that part.
Yeah.
That should have been a 24-year-old studly kid with Jessica Lange, and that would have been an appropriate adaptation of the book. No offense, Jack, but you looked a little well fed to be jumping off a hay truck during the Depression, So that's it. I just that's my take, Evan.
Yeah, and I think also with Postman Always Rings Twice, I mean, the guy's supposed to be super hot, like someone that she can't keep her hands off of. And I'm sorry, even when Jack Nicholson was younger, no way. Mike,
Yeah.
I just don't think, even if he'd been younger, he just was never that sexy.
I will defer to your expert opinion on that. But I did think that David Mamet did a very good adaptation of the book. He did the screenplay, and I thought he did a very good job of being faithful to Kane's original story.
All right, you gonna read the next one?
Yep. Oh, is that me?
It's you.
Oh, at the recent Telluride Film Festival, this is two people submitting this one, Mary Beth and JJ. At the recent Telluride Film Fest, we saw Dark Frames, a 73-minute documentary about film noir by Tom Thurman with a script by David Thompson. Wondering if Eddie or Ann has seen it, and what do you think of its take on noir? The film doesn't mention Double Indemnity, We understand that images from the film might have been outside the doc's budget, but don't you think any documentary about film noir needs to at least mention double indemnity? Have you
Yes.
seen it?
I have not seen the film, but yes, any documentary on Norse should be covering double indemnity.
Yes. In full disclosure, Tom and David both have contacted me about perhaps showing this film on TCM or something, and I know its origins. Its origins actually began in art pieces and art installations that Tom did utilizing imagery from film noir, and then David provided some very evocative narrative to go with the images, and it was an art installation then turned into a film, and I immediately recognized that they were going to have an issue here because of rights with the film clips and things, which you don't really have. Pardon me, which you don't really have in an art installation or anything like that. But as soon as you make a film or try to get something for broadcast, you're going to run into those problems. So it became very apparent when I watched the film that they were using all public domain clips in the movie. And this isn't the first time I've seen people travel down this road. There was a Jerome Chernin wrote the narration for a film. God, I was involved in this at an early stage. Now I can't remember the Empire State Murders or something like that. And they really got themselves behind the eight ball because I was able to help them get the participation of some Hollywood actors. And the conceit of that film was they wanted to film them today and then use clips from their movies to show them in their youth. And it was all these older people revisiting this crime at the Empire State Building back in the 1940s. And Marsha Hunt was in it, and Dick Erdman, and Kirk Douglas was in it. But they had a hell of a hard time trying to get appropriate film clips to work with it, I mean, Kirk Douglas, there aren't any Kirk Douglas movies in the public domain, So that's where you run into problems. So my suggestion is to not look at this production, to look at it more as a art piece than as a documentary about film noir, because they just could not afford to get the rights to all of this stuff. It's a struggle, I've had good friends make films and not have they didn't know to turn off, like shoot things on location, and they didn't know to turn off radios and things like that. Because if a song comes on the radio and it's in your shot, you got to pay. You got to pay for the song. You can't, and nobody can afford to do that, So this is how you live and learn. Okay.
What do you think about the ending of Man on a Tightrope, when Gloria changes from sobbing about her dying husband to taking the ring off his finger and then just dropping her hand? His hand. Her character changes so abruptly, a shift from one phase of her life to dealing with what comes next. Cheryl.
Have you seen it?
But it was like a really long time ago.
Well, it's fresh in my mind because I just showed it on TCM with Dana Delaney. I'm hoping that's where Cheryl maybe saw it as well.
I think so, yeah.
And then Cheryl knows that I was holding that film out as like a deathbed film because it was the one Gloria Graham movie I hadn't seen.
Wow.
But Dana wanted to show it, and so I was obligated to finally get around to watching it. I love the ending of the movie, and I think that Cheryl's reading of it is spot on. It didn't feel odd to me because what it represented to me was that she loved, I can't remember his name right now. Frederick March plays her husband. But she felt like he was married to the carnival and more than he was married to her.
Mm-hmm.
But that was because he was keeping from her the secret, which is that he was going to try to get the entire carnival across the border from East Germany to West Germany so that everybody could live free, right?
Yeah.
So that really colored his behavior and irritated the hell out of her. Then at the end, I just took it to mean that she is now going to make sure that he gets what he wants, because as she says here, he doesn't make it, and so she just becomes very steely about it, and I believe she sort of turns. It's she and Terry Moore, who is Frederick March's daughter. Actually, the whole ending turns on these two women who decide to follow through and keep the carnival together and just move on, which is clearly what he would have wanted. So the whole thing made perfect sense to me.
Okay, your turn.
Oh, okay. Liz writes in and says, I'm a huge fan of Cornell Woolrich and have been for many years. Some of my favorites have been adapted for radio and TV, but not film. And she cites The Night Reveals and Murder obliquely. I think both could be fleshed out into amazing full-length movies. Do either of you have any favorite Woolrich stories or novels that have not been made into a film that you think would make a great movie? Wow, there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
Anne, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, mine would be his final book, which he didn't finish, but was finished by Block. And but I would say if they did that story, I did not like the ending that was put on it. I felt that it was not the way he would have taken the story. Of course, it's hard to tell with Woolrich because with his stories, it's always sort of a roll of a die which way it was going. But I just felt with that setup, the kind of happy ending made like no sense to me. So I think I definitely would have wanted the ending changed. But I think it would have made an incredible film.
Okay. I think I mentioned this before, but one of my favorites, if not the favorite novel, is Rendezvous in Black. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it can be made into a movie. So that's, in a sense, I would love to ask Woolrich this, did he write, because I can't remember right now whether Rendezvous in Black or The Bride Wore Black came first, but I would almost suspect that he wrote The Bride Wore Black when he realized that Rendezvous in Black could not be adapted as a film. And if people have read it, they kind of know why. And because the central character is in disguise throughout in all these different chapters, and you're not quite certain which character is going to be revealed as the vengeful protagonist. And it would be just atrociously gimmicky as a movie, kind of like The List of Adrian Messenger or something, know? So I think he wrote The Bride Wore Black, which is basically the same story. It's like this person out for revenge against this series of men. And then that one you could do because there's no hiding the identity of Julie in The Bride Wore Black. It's just her going and getting her revenge on all these men. So quite honestly, if there was something to be made, it might be The Bride Wore Black, doing it again.
Yeah.
I realize that, Kill Bill is kind of like The Bride Wore Black, but I mean, it's very different. I wasn't wholly satisfied with Francois Truffaut's version. So I would kind of love to see, and I think the time is right. If you did it now, it would be perceived totally as like a Me Too kind
Yeah.
of story, and who knows, maybe it could get done again.
Yeah, and I think the other one, there's a short story of his he did, which I think is called, it's called Angel Face. And it was sort of a precursor to Black Angel in a way, that novel, except in this one, and it's told from her perspective, this woman's husband is like, I think it's like, yeah, he is actually arrested for killing his mistress. And so she's kind of going through the same process, except she's the one that killed the mistress. and she wants her husband back and stuff. And so, and it's really great as it goes along, because she also like, so she kind of like goes to police and says, oh, I'll go find this mobster she was involved with as well. So you know, it's similar. And, and so she sort of like frames him, but she actually winds up really liking him. So she also gives him a tip off so he can run away before he actually gets arrested. And it's just like a really interesting story, because the husband is completely clueless about what she's done and how she's manipulated everything. Because he always says to her, oh, you have an angel face, but no brain. Basically, he always says she's beautiful, but she's not really smart. So that's also kind of part of what's so great about the story, is that she's very smart. He just can't see it.
Good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anne, a quick question. Do you, because I know you're also a horror movie fan and stuff, do these kind of stories interest you for the twist or for the vibe?
So what, Woolrich specifically?
Yeah, specifically Woolrich.
I love his worldview. I love that. I love his completely, like I've always said, if I ever get a tattoo, it'd be first you dream, then you die, which was something that was found scribbled, in his papers by his biographer. And that to me is just like, yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. And then I really enjoy, I think he's written a lot of really good women characters. So I think maybe that's also part of why I'm really drawn to his work. He's got really great female characters. Yes. And I mean, where they're the protagonists investigating and those kind of things. And I do like the twist, and I like the fact that he'll kind of do the same story. Well, like I was just talking about with Angel Face and Black Angel. And what I love about it is they end differently. And then sometimes when he'd adapt them to the radio, they would end a third way. And I love that, because that gives you that feeling in real life where you don't know what's going to happen. I love that.
Yeah, which way is it going to go?
Yeah, which way?
It's just interesting, because the reason I thought of that was because I feel sorry for people who watch these types of stories or read them and say, oh, I figured out the twist. Yeah. And then they dismiss the movie as though the twist is the be all and end all. Because I find in Woolrich, invariably the twists don't completely pay off.
Yeah.
So you're going to be disappointed if that's the reason you're in it, Yeah. But like you say, it's like what you call the worldview, I was just calling the vibe. Like I actually like spending time in that place with these desperate people. I enjoy that. And when the twist, even when I see the twist coming and like, oh yeah, there it is, it doesn't alter my enjoyment one bit if I'd seen it coming and it turned out the way I thought it was going to turn out. It's like, oh yeah, okay. And then when the twist does work, it's all the better. Anyway, that's that.
Okay, and this one's from Joe from Tucson, Arizona. Like you, I've long been a fan of Zachary Scott. He starred in a 1957 British noir called Violent Stranger, also known as Man in the Shadow, co-starring Faith Domery. I have been searching for this film for several years, and the consensus among other collectors seems to be this is a lost film. Have you seen this one, and do you know anything about its status?
I have not seen it. So I have nothing to add except you've piqued my curiosity, John or Joe in Tucson, Arizona. You've piqued my curiosity. I have heard of this film, definitely. I'm trying to remember if Farron mentioned it in her profile of Zachary Scott that we ran in the Noir City magazine. I'm having a little memory failure right now, but I'm going to double check that story and see if it's referenced, because I'm sure Farron wouldn't have written about it in any extent if she hadn't seen it. And if she has seen it, I'll see if we can find out where she located a copy. And Joe in Tucson, Arizona, will let you know what we find out. But if it is in fact an elusive film, all the better. We'll try to track down what we can and see about resurrecting it.
Oh, yeah, it's your turn. Oh, excuse me.
Okay, two questions from Melanie. What are some of the least known noir classics you wish everyone would watch? And then her second question, I'm gonna dispense with first. I'm gonna get that out of the way first. She asked, "How did you start your career and develop your noir niche?" Now, I'm not going to be arrogant and assume she's asking me that question.
That was addressed to you.
But you're welcome to share how you developed your noir passion as well. But I'm just going to say that if you want that info, I'm happy to point out that I was recently a guest on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, the National Public Radio show, in which we got into all of that. And they archive their shows. So if you Google Terry Gross, NPR, Eddie Muller, I'm sure you will go right to the segment of that show. I think it was just on last Monday. Well, I don't know when this is airing or posting. So it was on the like the 20th of October or something. And you can listen to it there and learn that whole story.
Right.
So, Anne, what are some of the least known noir classics that you wish everyone would watch?
Black Angel, number one.
Okay.
It's actually in my like top 5 film noirs, and not a lot of people have seen it. Excuse me. I don't know. I'll stick with that.
Okay, it's hard to answer questions like this sometimes because you don't know the depth and breadth of the person asking the question. You don't know the depth and breadth of their experience. So what is little known to them might be well known to people who've been watching for 10 or 15 years, you know? So the one that I always toss out that people are like, oh, I don't know anything about that it, of course, is very well known to noir fans is Crisscross, the Robert Siodmak film Crisscross, which I absolutely love, but I'm always astounded to learn that a lot of people have never even heard of it. Oh. So I would say Crisscross because because it's a great film and it has big stars in it. So I feel relatively safe recommending that one, you know? Yeah. It's my favorite noir director, and Burt Lancaster and Yvonne DiCarlo are in it, and Dan Duryea. And so you can't go wrong. Sometimes I recommend an obscurity and people are like, this guy's got a screw loose, you know? You don't always hit when you say, you got to see Decoy. What an incredible film that is. And then it's like, what a piece of junk that was. Why did you recommend it?
Oh, you know what? One more on this one, Christmas Holiday.
Oh, yeah. But good luck.
Good luck finding it. But that would be, I mean, that's another Siodmak film, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, that's a sad state of affairs because Universal has lost the rights to that movie, and it's going to take some effort to pull that one back from I don't want to say oblivion, because I know that Universal has a beautiful 35 millimeter print of that movie, and they have the original negative of the movie because it was made at Universal, but they no longer have the rights to that, the underlying rights to the Somerset Maugham story that it's based on. So it takes some finagling. That's on my list, but it's, because it's a studio film, it's a little further down the list because it's very, very hard to get any traction with lawyers and accountants.
Yeah.
There, I said it. Okay, your turn.
Are there any comedies that you would recommend which you feel would be especially appealing to fans of film noir? For example, I think Preston Sturges' The Great McGinty has much in common with the noirs of the period. Garv.
Well, Garv obviously didn't hear us talk about another Preston Sturges movie, Unfaithfully Yours, which is full on noir comedy. And we mentioned one earlier on this program, Big Deal on Madonna Street, which if you don't mind subtitles on your comedy, that's sensational. And I'll mention a couple of other ones. I know that I've shown on TCM a couple of years ago. I showed The Good Humor Man, with Jack Carson. That was a great lesson in how you can take a story that is noir and turn it into a comedy, thanks to Frank Tashlin, who just basically changed the occupation of the protagonist to a good humor man and just let it rip from there. And all the comedy kind of flows from the fact that Jack Carson drives around a little truck and sells ice creams at the back of the truck, but yet it's filled with, there's murders and backstabbing and all kinds of stuff, except it's hysterically funny. At least I think so. A lot of people didn't like it, but and I'm also in December on TCM, I'm showing a little known B film that I really love that's very funny, called Buy Me That Town. I'm not showing this as part of Noir Alley. It's just a holiday choice. And all the hosts were told, it doesn't have to be a holiday movie, right? In which case I would have chosen Remember the Night with Stanwyck and Fred McMurray, which is Preston Sturges' screenplay and is absolutely fantastic. But Buy Me That Town is a very Damon Runyon-like story. It stars Lloyd Nolan and a bunch of character actors as guys who have to get out of town, and they go to this small town till the heat dies down, and then they realize that they can just take over the entire town. And it's very funny because, obviously things don't go as planned and hilarity ensues. and it's really good. It's very good movie. So those are a few recommendations.
It's your turn.
Oh.
And this is a good question for you.
Have you ever heard the album Black Love by the Afghan Whigs? Greg Dooley, the lead singer and writer, thought of it as the soundtrack to an unmade film noir. Do you think it carries that noir feel? Andrea asked that question. I think that's how you pronounce that, and I'm pretty sure that's a man. And I don't know the album. I'm admitting that. My late friend Eric was a big fan of the Afghan Whigs, and I think the only album, I'm trying to remember the name of it, the only one that I remember was, do you know the Afghan Whigs, Ann?
Nope.
I think it was called Gentleman or Gentleman or something like that. But I think that was before this album. So I haven't heard it, and I will be happy to listen to it and perhaps report back in a later installment what I think of it. But I will say that I find that there is more influence. Noir has had more of an influence on rock musicians than it has had on filmmakers. Yeah, I really think so.
Yeah, and we did a whole rock and roll issue of North City Magazine, which you can get the back issue of that. And I think that was a really good choice because there was so much to cover in that.
And we did that with some artists who clearly we were just saying, wow, this could be noir, like the Johnny Cash stuff that was written about, or the fact that the Doors are kind of noirish, and that Jim Morrison, was a film student at USC before he formed the band. So he certainly had a background in all of that. Did you know that Jim Morrison and Sam Fuller were friends?
I did not know that.
Yeah,
that's kind of awesome.
Like Jim Morrison would make pilgrimages up the hill to the shed where Sam had his office, at his house up in the canyon, and he'd spend time talking to Fuller about movies, and it's kind of interesting to consider. And of course, Tom Waits is full on noir, but it's very interesting how in many cases it may be songs or albums or something, but just the noir influence is pretty prevalent in a lot of, not just rock music. You see it in rock music and in jazz, all kinds of jazz artists who are very, very noir inspired. So I will check out Black Love by the Afghan Wigs. Thank you for the tip on that.
Okay, and this one is from Martin from the Netherlands. Is there any noir movie from the classic period you would like to see a remake of, maybe because the original could be improved on or done in a modern reimagining of? And what would be the ideal cast and director?
It's funny. You don't really want to remake good films, I don't think. And in some ways, I think there are movies that have been remade, even though they're just influenced by or inspired by, they're not an actual remake. But I'll say this. The other day, I was working on something having to do with The Big Clock, Kenneth Fearing's The Big Clock. And it caused me to watch the movie again and go back to the source novel, which are very, very different. And I was just amazed at how good that novel is, and how good the adaptation is, Jonathan Latimer's adaptation of it. And I know it was remade as No Way Out, with Kevin Costner and Gene Hackman and Will Patton and Sean Young. But it was remade as a movie set in Washington, D.C. And it seemed to me that this would be a good movie to be made today because it's about the media. The original book is about, Earl Janoff and his media empire. And it is so easy for me to see somebody like Rupert Murdoch in substituting for that Janoff character. And I think a thriller like that set today in the world of the media and the internet and all that would be really great. And I think that story is so fantastic, where the innocent man is believed to be guilty and he has to find the culprit while trying to hide himself from the pursuers is such a great premise that it would lend itself very well. So I would say The Big Clock, just off the top of my head. Although I have to say, in the time remaining here, Martin, I'm not going to think of a good cast or a good director for that one. I just don't know. I'd be grasping at straws here. The way it works now, because there's no studio system, is you have to pick somebody that can get the film made.
Yeah.
Right. So who's hot? Who's a bankable star? The one thing I really do love about movies today, as opposed to back then, is you could remake The Big Clock with an actress in the Ray Milland role instead of an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And it would work absolutely as well. In some ways, it could even be better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to consider. It doesn't have to be a man playing the lead role.
Yeah, and my pick would be Serenade.
Oh,
Because of course the film adaptation makes no sense because they had to leave out the primary motivation of the character. And I mean, you need to, I think, to do it as a period piece, but I would love to see a really good adaptation of the story because I think it could be really great.
that's a brilliant observation, and I'd be curious to know if a faithful adaptation of Serenade would run afoul of the cultural
Yeah,
police.
that would be problematic.
It would be problematic
Yeah.
because I mean, it's funny. I've always really thought that's one of Kane's better books.
Yeah, me too.
And yet I do see recent reviews of the book that just dismiss it out of hand because the depiction of homosexuality in it just doesn't jibe with the way people want that to be depicted today, but that's why you're saying it needs to be a period piece, because you still have to have some of the residual guilt and misery and everything attached with it, but because it is a great book, and I still think that's a totally viable subject, like, because it becomes about homophobia.
Hmm.
It's not the rationale. It's like what it's about.
Yeah.
I never got the impression reading the book that Kane was homophobic necessarily. It's just
No.
he was writing these characters, and like that's where Juana, that was the culture that she came from,
Yeah.
and anyway, it's that's a really, really great pick, and you're right. That is overdue for adaptation.
Yeah, because they're also, the main character really has internalized homophobia, and I felt that that was more what Kane was getting at, was internalized homophobia. I don't feel that Kane had a judgment about men sleeping together. He was exploring the impact of that on this character.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe somebody will be gutsy enough to make it.
Pedro Almodovar would be good. That would probably be my pick. Because he could get away with, because he's politically incorrect all the time. He just doesn't care. So.
And I think you ought to start putting this package together.
I
mean, that was great. I mean, I have to say, you are spot on. Almodovar would be the ideal director for that. He's a huge noir guy. He loves his film noir.
Yeah.
So that's terrific. Okay, I have to sign off now because I have to go pick my wife up at the airport.
And that was actually our last question, so we did it perfectly.
Well done, and I thank everybody for that. Those are really good questions. I mean, I feel stupid sometimes when I'm stumped, but folks, I got to confess, I haven't seen everything. So
yeah, we had quite a few strikeouts this time around.
but it's nice because it is like a conversation, because people are turning us on to stuff that we haven't seen before. So I've got my marching orders. I'm going to go off and find more East German noir, more Russian noir. I'm getting to it. So we will be back soon. Anne,
yes.
Has Charlotte eaten tonight?
Yeah, they get fed as soon as I walk in the door.
Oh, okay.
However, I have not been fed, so I am really excited about eating.
Okay, very good. Go enjoy yourself, and I will see you next time. Same place, same time. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.